Baccarat, the high-stakes card game popularized by likes of James Bond and Frank Sinatra, is a game of luck, not skill. Unlike poker, it requires no intuition or creativity, and unlike blackjack, players don't benefit from a well-rehearsed betting strategy. With a house advantage just hovering over 1%, Baccarat is more like a glorified coin toss. Unless of course you're Phil Ivey, the world-famous poker champion who found an ingenious and, as it turns out, prohibited way to exploit the game. In 2012, Ivey played marathon rounds of Baccarat at casinos in New Jersey and Britain. His winnings were staggering. In 4 visits to the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City, he raked in about $9.6 million. And in a 2-day Baccarat binge at Crocksford in London, he netted more than $10 million. When the casinos investigated his alarmingly large haul, they cried foul. The crux of this entire battle has centered around a controversial practice known as edge sorting. In essence, a player who uses edge sorting can detect asymmetries in the manufacturer's patterns on the backs of playing cards. Edge sorting has been around for ages, but it's very hard to master, harder still to utilize, and very hard to catch. Much like card counting, it can go under the radar. Before Ivey's stunning rampage, most casinos hadn't even heard about edge sorting. The technique relies on small irregularities in the patterns on the backs of playing cards. Don't expect anything obvious, of course. As you see, there's a subtle difference between the size of the partial shapes on the edges of the cards. They're bigger on one side than the other. You're probably wondering how this can help at all. It is not a marking that allows you to recognize a specific card, but a common pattern for all cards in the deck. The truth is very simple. Edge sorting allows you to recognize cards that have been rotated. As you well know, there is no upside down with cards. They're perfectly symmetrical, or at least their fonts are. However, if you manage to rotate a card and have a very keen eye, you will be able to tell its back apart from the rest. In a simple game like Baccarat, a patient player might be able to sort out all the cards in the deck into good and bad. This would allow him or her to know when an advantageous card would be dealt and to adjust his stakes accordingly. In other words, the house would be turned on its head and transform into a player edge. Of course, using this technique has some very important requirements. First off, you need to train your visual acuity vigorously. After all, looking at the backs of the cards with a magnifying glass would be extremely suspicious. In most cases, you need to be able to discern the minuscule difference in the pattern while one of the edges is sticking out of a shuffling machine. After you have familiarized yourself with the card pattern, you would need to find a compliant dealer who would allow you to turn the cards and keep the same deck between the games. Naturally, this is nearly impossible to achieve, unless you have a high-rolling VIP like Phil Ivey tagging along. In reality, Phil Ivey could not handle edge sorting. He was never trained to do so. The poker star was needed because he was famous enough to get favorable treatment by the casino officials. As you may have guessed, the mastermind behind the whole endeavor was his Chinese companion, Ching Young-sun. An heiress of a rich Chinese family, she had been a regular customer of US casinos for ages. However, a stint in a Las Vegas prison due to an unpaid casino marker filled Kelly with a lust for revenge. Edge sorting turned out to be a perfect means of accomplishing her goals. After meticulous studying and hard training, Kelly soon mastered the still obscure technique and set out on a Baccarat rampage. She made quite the reputation in certain circles and quickly became known as the Queen of Sorts. However, to strike big, she still needed a VIP partner, and Phil Ivey was the perfect candidate. Sun's edge sorting ability allowed her to flip the advantage on its head. At full power, her technique could yield a 6.5% advantage to the player. However, she still needed financial backing to hit the casino for real money. That's when Ivey came into the picture. The two met through mutual connections. From those meetings, the new partnership developed a plan to take the house down. Phil Ivey's tremendous bankroll and reputation meant they could receive white glove treatment from any casino they chose. This consideration from the staff was crucial for the success of their plan. For Sun to edge sort accurately, she required that the casinos met 4 conditions. Number 1, the dealer must speak Cantonese. Sun wanted a dealer with whom she could speak in her native language, to be sure. However, the addition of an Asian dealer would lend veracity to Sun's next two requests as mere superstition rather than a calculated plan. Number 2. The dealer had to shuffle and sort cards in a specific manner. Sun needed the cards arranged in a certain way to see the variations of the cards properly. Number 3. The deck could not be changed at any position. Obviously, Sun didn't want to have to try to learn a new set of variations every hour or so. Number 4. Instead of Baccarat, they had to play Mini Baccarat. Mini Baccarat proceeds like the normal version of the game, with one notable exception. Specifically, the dealer is the only one to touch the cards in Mini Baccarat. Presumably, Sun and Ivey believed that they would not run afoul of gambling authorities and courts if they never touched the cards. Neither of the two targeted casinos, the Borgata and the Crocksfords, rejected any of the 4 requests. The profit potential of getting a shot at Ivey's bankroll likely proved too great to ignore, and neither property wanted Ivey and Sun to walk immediately out of the door. The pair first put their plan into motion in April of 2012. Borgata became the duo's most frequent target. Starting with the April session, the pair hit the Atlantic City property 4 times. In that time, Ivey and Sun managed to take $9.6 million from the Borgata in Baccarat alone. Phil Ivey then used his winnings on the casino's craps tables to win an extra $560,000. Each time Borgata dutifully paid out his losses to the poker superstar and his Asian partner. After 3 hits on the Borgata, the pair decided to vary their venue. In August, they entered Crockford's in London because of its old-school sensibilities meant that the staff would cater to them extensively. The pair began playing for the English equivalent of $150,000 per hand. Less than 24 hours later, Ivey and Sun were up roughly $12 million. Casino finally decided that a deck change was in order. Immediately, the two players concluded their game, accepted a receipt for the money, and left the casino entirely. Ultimately, Crockford's reviewed its security footage and elected not to wire the money to Ivey and Sun. In the meantime, the two players played their 5th and last session of Baccarat together at their old Borgata stomping grounds. Although Ivey and Sun took the two casinos for about $22.1 million, however, the collection of those funds has proven far more difficult since. Needless to say, Ivey was disturbed by Crockford's decision to keep his winnings. So in 2014, he took the casino and its parent company Genting UK into a British court to seek relief. In his court arguments, Ivey defended the practice of edge sorting and denied any wrongdoing on him or Sun's part. He argued that Crockford allowed him to create a favorable situation for himself, and he took advantage of their naivety and greed. Unfortunately, the UK court disagreed with Ivey's assertions. The legal authority upheld Crockford's refusal to honor the win, but did allow Ivey the opportunity to appeal the decision. Ivey immediately appealed. The problem was, at that time, edge sorting was not considered cheating. Most casinos simply didn't know about it. Matters got complicated when Ivey outright admitted to using edge sorting, but called it legitimate gamesmanship. The crux of his defense was his interpretation of edge sorting as an advantage play technique. As it turned out, Phil and the authorities did not see eye to eye. He lost both cases, even though further appeals by the poker star are still getting processed. Edge sorting has now officially been recognized as a cheating technique, and casino authorities are changing their internal procedures in order to counter it. One of Ivey's tactics to avoid payment of the judgment was to claim insufficient assets in New Jersey. However, according to a February 2019 ruling, that argument no longer holds water. The court ruled that Borgata may now pursue Ivey's Nevada assets in its attempts to satisfy the judgment amount it has against him. Borgata attorneys have alleged that Ivey's Nevada assets alone may be worth more than $100 million. Phil Ivey and his legal team have hit back against the Borgata crusade. Ivey filed an 800-page appeal to the 3rd District U.S. Court of Appeals on March 18, 2019. The appeal maintains that the district court should have applied a statute of limitation on Borgata to file a claim. Needless to say, the appeal is seeking relief from the lower court's $10.1 million judgment against Ivey and Sun.